Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, the host of the Four Boxes Diner. For those of you new to this channel, and we have thousands of new subscribers, and I welcome you aboard. Thank you for joining us. I'm really grateful. I am a constitutional attorney. I'm a member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, a best-selling author, and a gun owner. And in 2021, a federal judge, Roger Benitez, cited and quoted to my Second Amendment scholarship to declare California's so-called assault weapon ban to be unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. And if you love the Second Amendment like I do, and you want to protect it like I do, please hit the subscribe button and help us spread the word to all of America here on YouTube. You probably have noticed that many anti-gunners have been running around screaming about the supposed death of democracy in the United States. They complain about things like the filibuster in the United States Senate. They complain about the Electoral College, which is how we've elected presidents for literally over 200 years. And they complain about the United States Supreme Court, all standing in the way of their various agendas, including the agenda of more and more gun control and more gun bans. But guess what, you anti-gunners out there? Here is a lesson, and I want you all to understand this. Every time you see the word democracy being bandied about as some political slogan, I want you to make sure you understand the reality of what this means, okay? The reality is this, that the United States of America is not a pure democracy. We have never been a pure democracy. And we do not want to live under a pure democracy, which is really just another form of mob rule or tyranny of the majority against the minority and the minority's rights. Let's break it down. Here is the lesson I want you to take away from this video. When you hear people talking about as just a political slogan or label in an op-ed or something, okay, and the anti-gunners are notorious for this, and they're crying about the end of democracy or how something hurts democracy or something is not democratic, be careful. Your ears should perk up. Because in many instances, not all, but in many instances, they are looking for an excuse and a way to try to steal away your individual rights under the Bill of Rights, including, but not limited to, the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. Let's be very clear here, okay? Here is the definition of the pure democracy, which is that the majority rules the world, the country, whatever it is that's being voted on, the town, okay? This is the definition of a pure democracy. I want you to take this away with you. A democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch. In other words, a pure democracy allows 51% of the voters to vote to enslave, take away the rights. The other 49% of the voters that voted, or perhaps to just simply steal all the property of the 49% that are in the minority and transfer their wealth to the majority 51%. This is the danger of democracy in its purest form. This sort of society, again, where 51% of the people can vote to enslave, right? Take away the rights from, take away the property of, the other 49% is really, at the end of the day, a form of mob rule, where the mob gets to legally trample on the rights of the minorities who are not in that 51% of the majority voting bloc. Okay, now it turns out that the founding fathers of the United States were really, really smart. Much smarter than I am, okay? And they understood the dangers of mob rule, and they wrote about this. This is why the framers of the Constitution, the framers of the U.S. Constitution, wanted so desperately to design a national government, a national political system that included major protections for the rights of the lamb, the rights of the minority, the rights of the people that might be on the wrong side of an election. You see, our founding fathers were intent on preventing the majority from running roughshod over the minority and the rights, especially the fundamental rights of the minority. It is from this concern of our founding fathers from which we get one of the most famous quotes in political history, certainly in American history, but I would say all of political history. And that is a quote from none other than founding father Benjamin Franklin. You see, as Benjamin Franklin left the Constitutional Convention, which came up with the Constitution itself, Franklin was reportedly asked, what kind of government have the founders proposed for the United States? Franklin, how did he reply? He said, a republic, if you can keep it. That's correct. The founders created a republic and not a pure democracy on purpose. It was by design. It was not a bug. It was a feature. That was for you computer scientists out there, by the way. The founders here designed a constitutional system full of checks and balances that prevented a pure democracy from coming into existence, and which included various checks and balances such as the Electoral College, which is how we elect our presidents, through Electoral College. The staggered terms of United States senators. Every 6 years, there's a new, 1/3 of the U.S. Senate is up for election. They serve for 6 years, and it's staggered every 2 years, right? Different senators are up for election. A United States Supreme Court that's there to interpret the Constitution and help ensure that other branches don't run roughshod over our rights. And yes, the existence of the Bill of Rights, that includes the rights of Americans to own private firearms, to keep and bear arms. This is also why our government is not a democracy. It is a republican form of government. The key takeaway is that the founders never wanted a democracy, and I want you to keep 2 points in mind. First, the framers did not create what James Madison called a pure democracy, where all voters vote on every issue presented to society. Instead, we elect political leaders to represent us. This is why you'll sometimes hear the United States described as a representative democracy. But there's a broader point I want you to understand. Again, the founders feared the tyranny of the majority. They want to protect the rights of minorities in America. James Madison, the father of the Constitution, he wrote the Constitution. Madison made this point crystal clear. In Federalist Papers number 51, Madison wrote, quote, "It is of great importance in a republic not only to guard the society against the oppression of its rulers, but to guard one part of the society against the injustice of the other part." Madison also added, if a majority be united by a common interest, the rights of the minority will be insecure. James Madison actually called this an evil, and the Constitution was designed to prevent it. Again, you want to protect the lamb in a democracy against the other two wolves voting about what to have for dinner. So how does the Constitution protect the rights of the minority? Well, if you haven't noticed, the Constitution includes a lot of mechanisms or obstacles to prevent mob rule. Article 4 to the United States Constitution provides, the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. Again, not a purely democratic form of government. Article 4 of the U.S. Constitution talks about a republican form of government, not a democratic form of government, for a reason. Let's go beyond that, though. The Constitution also includes a Bill of Rights, which, as you know, was not originally in the Constitution. It had to be added as the first 10 amendments because some of the states in the United States did not want to approve the original Constitution without a Bill of Rights setting forth the most fundamental rights that can never be interfered with by the federal government. Okay, we'll do a video about that. At some point down the road. But for now, just understand that one of the checks and balances to protect minority rights against majority rule was the Bill of Rights, which really laid out things that were so fundamental to Americans that nobody wanted any legislature or referendum or vote to basically undercut it, okay? And these rights found in the Bill of Rights, of course, cannot be violated by government. And one of them is, of course, the First Amendment, right to free speech, right to religious liberty, and the Second Amendment, right to keep and bear arms, okay? Again, this is another clear sign the founders wanted to protect minority rights against majority rule. The Constitution also sets up checks and balances among the three branches of the federal government. You know them. That's the legislative branch, the Congress. That's the executive branch, that's the president, and the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court and the lower courts, known as, by the way, in the Constitution, the inferior courts. Inferior courts. Okay. Now, we know we have two houses of Congress. We have the United States Senate, which has equal representation for every state. 2 senators for every state. And in the House of Representatives, the more populous states get more representatives, which is why the United States Census is so important, because it allocates which states get more representation in Congress. So it's always good for a gun state that's good on guns to have more representatives than like a bad gun state like California or New York, because there will be more House votes potentially in favor of gun rights than against them. Okay? Now, for bills to become law in Congress, both houses, the Senate and the House, need to pass it, and the president needs to sign it. This structure makes it more likely that we get legislation acceptable to a broad cross-section of society, not just to a narrow majority that may dominate in any one moment, okay? Oh, and by the way, until 1913, United States senators were chosen by state legislatures. They weren't even chosen by direct elections of the people of a state. So the U.S. senator from New York would be selected, let's say, from the New York State legislature up until 1913. The Constitution also provides an electoral college for picking the president. You know this. The framers set that up to balance the competing interests of big states like New York and California with small states like Rhode Island and Idaho. And if it were not for the electoral college, presidential candidates in the United States, instead of going across the country to go to places like New Hampshire, to go to places like Iowa and the like, they would instead focus only on big cities, not even big states, big cities. They would basically just campaign in New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, San Francisco, you know the rest, okay? And they would basically just be allowed to ignore the interest of the rest of the country. But people in Casper, Wyoming, and in Manchester, New Hampshire, and in Sioux City, Iowa, they have interests that should be represented by the government as well, obviously. And they have the same rights as anybody else under the United States Constitution. Note that the world the anti-gunners want to live in, though, is a world where urban environments control the country. They want to live in, this is my view, but I think I'm right, they want to live in a nation where a handful of cities control the rest of America. Why do the anti-gunners want this? Well, I think it's because they've concluded it's a lot easier to enact gun control if they only have to persuade a handful of people in a powerful city rather than to have a broad-based consensus in support of their agenda, which is really unpopular, frankly. You see, look around the world. Look at how London, the city of London, controls the United Kingdom, right? Whatever London wants, the whole United Kingdom has to go that way. That's how fox hunting, I think, got banned, is because the people in London didn't like fox hunting, and they just said, sorry, we don't like it, we're going to ban it, and we don't care about the traditions in northern the United Kingdom, up in the parts that are more rural, okay? And also take a look at this. We have the same problem here in the United States. Look at how Seattle controls Washington State, the way San Francisco and Los Angeles control California. Look at how Boston has great control over what happens in Massachusetts, and the way New York City controls New York State. And then, of course, there's the Senate filibuster rule. That's the one you hear a lot of people on the left, a lot of the anti-gunners attacking today as anti-democratic. They're desperate to kill it. The filibuster, though, is not in the Constitution, but it's been in place for 185 years. And you know what the filibuster is designed to do? It's designed to protect the minority. The idea is to prevent a narrow majority from ramming crazy legislation down the throats of a significant minority. And it's been doing this that's exactly how the filibuster has been working for almost 2 centuries, regardless of which political party happened to be in power at any given time. Plus, the Constitution divides powers between the federal and state governments and limits federal powers to those powers articulated, identified in Article 1 of the United States Constitution. Though, of course, in reality, in my opinion, I think we've ignored those limits quite a bit lately, and that's unfortunate. But here at the Four Boxes Diner, as you know, we spend most of our time talking about the Second Amendment's right to keep and bear arms. Okay? Why was the right to keep and bear arms so important to the founders? How did it find its way into the Bill of Rights? Well, it's because the founders knew that oppressive regimes throughout history had disarmed the people. They'd studied this. And the founders wanted to make sure that this sort of thing did not happen in the United States. They wanted to make sure that you and I were citizens of the United States and not serfs and not subjects to some king or a tyrant. And that tyrant, by the way, could also be a mob rule form of pure democracy, which again, the founders did not want. Now, after nearly 250 years here in the United States, there is a growing movement, by the way, to toss aside all these wise protections of minority rights, everything from the First Amendment to the Second Amendment to the filibuster to the Electoral College. This is not random. This is not a coincidence. This is part of the plan of many of the people that don't want us to have the right to keep and bear arms, because they view that right as one of the checks and balances that they want to get rid of to make sure that pure democracy rules in America at the expense of minority rights, including fundamental rights that belong to minorities here in this country. So let's wrap up. What should you say when people complain that if you defend the filibuster or the Electoral College, or you say that we're not a pure democracy here in the United States, or you justify judicial enforcement of the actual terms of the Bill of Rights, including the Second Amendment, that you're anti-democratic somehow? Here's what you say. You're darn right we are anti-democratic. And why is that? It's because we're trying to do what the founding fathers and the framers of the Constitution intended, to prevent razor-thin majorities from oppressing the minority. In the name of democracy, many on the anti-gun movement, as I see it, are trying to sweep away the remaining barriers to the tyranny of the majority to the minority. And in fighting back, we aren't just protecting our constitutional rights, we're also defending American institutions and individual freedom that we are very lucky to have here in this country, especially when you look around the world at places that aren't so lucky. So, hope you learned something here today. Thanks for joining me at the Four Boxes Diner, where we serve fresh, hot Second Amendment news and analysis. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe and spread the word. And we'll see you next time here at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.